All right, so hello and welcome everyone. My name is Dan Rodney, and I'm going to be here teaching Noble Desktop's seminar for getting started in web design. If you aren't familiar with Noble Desktop, we're a training center located in New York City, and we also teach all of our classes live online as well. So you can tune in from anywhere, but our classes are done live, interactive, and tonight we're doing this live stream of getting started in web design. Before we dive in and go through a couple slides here, most of tonight is going to be a demonstration of me showing you how to actually create a website. So by the end of the seminar, I will have made a little website and made it go live, and you can see that whole process. So instead of me just talking about it, showing you will make this a lot more real so that you understand exactly what's going on. So for the coding portion of that, there is a downloadable step-by-step exercise. So this link here, which is nobledesktop.com/presentation/webdesign. For those of you who are attending live here, I'm going to paste this into the chat. If you're watching this on a recording, this will be down below the video. If you're on YouTube, this will be in the video description, and if you're on our blog post, it'll be somewhere in the blog post as well. So you can access this. We'll keep this page up, and you can download an exercise, which is step-by-step. It walks you through the coding portion of what I'm going to be showing tonight. So it has you download the class files, which you can get on our website, and then it goes step-by-step through the coding portion of tonight. So literally walks you through the process of doing what I'm going to do, coding the website. So you don't have to remember every single step. We've already written that exercise for you, which is a great reference for later. So that could be the hands-on portion. So after you watch this demonstration, if you want to practice it yourself, you can do that exercise. And that's a sample of what we do in our web design classes. So basically the class format is that we teach you something, explain how it goes, and then you do an exercise. This is going to be a longer demonstration than it normally would be, just because this is a free seminar that we're giving. So we want to go through the whole process of creating a website. So normally we'd break it down into smaller bits when we're doing an in-person or live online class when you're doing one of the paid classes. This slide deck right here is an interactive thing that you can use your arrow keys to go left and right, or the arrows down here at the bottom left, bottom right here. You can adjust those. And I'll spend just a little bit of time going through a couple concepts, and then I'll dive in and actually show you how to code a website. So by the end of the seminar, you'll see a website go live, and that'll give you a better idea of how to make a website and how to get started getting into web design. So when you think about a website, the things that you need for a website is you need graphics and you need a design. So basically you need a plan. So you need to know what it is that you want to build, and that's the design portion of it. You also need to create the graphics, the photos, the icons, logos, that sort of stuff to put into the website. And then you can take that design and those graphics and you can code them to make a fully functional website that works in your web browser. So that's what you need to do to create a website. You also need to get a host and things that we'll talk about a little bit later. But fundamentally, you're going to design, you're going to create graphics, and you're going to write code. That's what a web designer essentially does, or a web developer. And so if you're getting into the design aspect of it, so when you say I'm a web designer, some web designers are purely aesthetic designers and they don't know code. And then there's other web designers that do know code. If somebody says I'm a web designer, I'd have to ask them whether or not they know code. If somebody says I'm a web developer, then that does mean that they do know code and they probably don't know design. But some web developers do have some design skills, some do not. But if somebody identifies as a web developer, that primarily means they're a coder. But a web designer could be generic. They might or may not know code. But I think it's important for any web designer to know code. Typically, when I see great web designers, they are familiar with code. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily coding all day long, but they may code a little bit. They might code a lot. It depends on the web designer in particular. But Fast Company wrote up this thing: learn to code, even if you don't intend to code. Knowing how to code will make you a better designer and a stronger candidate. I fully agree with that. I just wanted to put up a quote from somebody else saying it, so it's not just me, that you can get somebody else's word for it, and you know, a company like Fast Company, so it's not some no-name place. So there's different types of coding. Tonight we're going to be doing what's called front-end coding, and that's stuff that works in your web browser or client-side. So client-side or front-end coding is things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So these are the three coding languages that work in your web browser. HTML marks up or labels or tags your content. So think about it this way. If you went to a tag sale, you know, a yard sale or a garage sale, you don't know the price of something unless there are tags on it. And so the same thing happens with text. If you just take a piece of text, what is that? Is it a heading? Is it a paragraph? Is it a list item? You don't know unless you've marked it up or labeled or tagged that content so that browsers understand what it is. Otherwise, it's just text. Now, CSS, cascading style sheets, styles your content based on that markup. So if you have a heading or a paragraph, you can make it look the way you want it to look. Position it on the page, give it font, give it size, all sorts of things. Then comes in JavaScript. So at its core, every page needs to have at least HTML and CSS. So you have content that's styled. Then as an optional thing, which a lot of websites have, is JavaScript. And JavaScript is kind of like the lord of the web page. It comes in and says, I can change anything at any time, and I can kind of do anything that I want. And I'm going to sit over top of HTML and CSS, and I'm going to have you do whatever I want you to do. So I can animate things. I can make interactivity that if you click on this, something else will show up. There can be logic to test. Did you enter in a credit card properly? Did you enter in an email properly? So it kind of sits over top of your content and your styling, and it can change any of that at any point. So HTML and CSS are the easier things to learn to get started with. JavaScript is definitely a step up from that. But these are the things that work in your browser to make a web page function. Now, cool thing is once you're learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript, you can use it for more than just websites. For example, ebooks, email, and even some applications use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In the case of an email, if you've ever gotten a nicely formatted email, that's using HTML and CSS. Now, the rules for emails are a bit different than for a web page. There are some things that you need to do a little bit differently, but fundamentally it's the same coding language that you're learning. You're just doing things a little bit different for an email than a web page. So the main picture here is that once you're learning HTML and CSS, you can do more than just websites. You can also do emails. You can maybe do ebooks. And so the more people use HTML and CSS, the more they want to use it. And so it's a very good coding language or coding languages to learn. And I think that if you want to learn it, that you can learn it. It's not just for like the super uber computer geeks, of which I consider myself a computer geek. But the cool thing about learning HTML and CSS is it's one of the nice entry computer languages. So if you're ever going to learn some type of coding, HTML and CSS are good ways to start learning how to code. There's different types of coding or programming, as I like to call them. And to me, coding is easier because a code represents something. So if you're doing a heading, there's a code that represents a heading. And so it's just a simple thing of this equals that. This tag represents a heading. And it's not super high level stuff like computer programming. If you're going to make a computer program, that's a much higher level type of programming. So if you're going to create an iPhone app or an iPad app using Swift, Swift is a higher level programming language, and that's going to be more difficult and more conceptually hard to learn. So whenever you're getting started with any sort of coding, so if this is your first foray into coding and you've never done any coding before, focus on the big picture concepts. There's going to be lots of little syntax and things that you'll need to pick up as you go through, but you want to just kind of dive in and just start working with it. You know, you'll make mistakes, you'll figure them out. But when you're first learning, don't worry so much about memorizing everything immediately. Memorization will come. Eventually, you'll be able to remember these things. Trust me, I've been there. I didn't remember everything in the beginning. And also, you don't have to remember everything either, because you always have Google to look up those things that you only do occasionally. You want to be able to memorize the the things you do all the time, because that way you can be quicker, but the memorization will come. So as you practice, you'll eventually, as you do things over and over again, you will eventually memorize this stuff. So you will get to a point at some point where you don't have to keep looking up like, oh, what was that code for that? What was that code for that? But that just takes time and practice. So mainly focus on like how things work and understanding that, and know that the exact syntax and the memorization that's going to come. You are learning a coding language, so it's not an intuitive thing that you just pick up and say, I'm just going to wing it today and I'll be able to create a web page. Just like you wouldn't say, you know what, I've never spoke Spanish, but I'm just going to wing it and I'm sure I'll get through this conversation, no problem. Nobody would say that. You could learn Spanish and speak Spanish. Same thing as you can learn HTML and CSS and you can code it, but it is something you need to study and learn so that you know the proper ways to do things. Now, I sucked at foreign languages, so if you were not good at learning foreign languages, don't worry. For some reason, I'm good at computer languages, but I'm not so great at foreign languages. So if you weren't very good at languages, don't let that scare you off. So as a quick kind of synopsis here, I mentioned briefly what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are, but those are front-end things. So let me go a little bit further. You right now, and actually you, literally you, are looking at a web page right now. And in the browser, which is what we call the front end of a website, what happens in a web browser, you're seeing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, as I explained just a moment ago. There is another backend part, which is on the web server. And we'll talk more about getting a web server a little bit later on, but there's some technologies that run on the web server. And some of those things are coding languages, such as PHP, Ruby on Rails, and JavaScript. And then there are things that are built with those coding languages, such as WordPress. WordPress is written with PHP. So these coding languages, they run on the server and they do certain things. For example, there could be a database and you want to grab things out of the database. So what's a database, you might ask? A database is a place to store information. So if you have a shop and you want to store records of all the purchases, who purchased what, on what date, and you want to keep all those transactions, where are you going to store it? That's going to be stored in a database. If you have a blog, which is what WordPress is popular for, and it can create also just regular websites, not just only blog sites as well. It's a pretty versatile platform, but WordPress stores its pages and its blog posts in a database. So PHP can go into the database, grab some content, pull it out, create a page, put everything together again, and create dynamic pages. So these things happen on the web server. We're not going to get into that side of things today. We're going to focus on the front end, but just know that there are a lot of different things you could potentially learn, but you don't have to learn everything to get started. It's very common for people to focus on one side of this, the front end or the back end. For example, I focus more on the front end. I am familiar with some of the back end, but if I'm going to typically work on a bigger site, I'm going to often work with a back end developer so that they can do that portion and I'll focus on the front end. And likewise for that back end developer, they probably aren't that great with front end. Like they might know how to write a little bit of CSS, but they're probably not that great with CSS. So they focus on some different technologies than I focus on. And on bigger projects, it will be common for you to work with other developers and they can do some parts and you can do the other parts. So while you can certainly learn all of it, not necessarily every single thing out there under the sun, but you can learn a lot of different things. Don't feel like when you first get started that you have to know it all. It's a very deep rabbit hole that you can go in of tons of technologies for websites. Don't feel like you have to learn all of them to get started. Just start simple. You can always expand and learn more things. One person doesn't have to know everything just to get started building a website. Tonight, we're going to build a website with just HTML and CSS. We're not even going to use JavaScript. Also, you might notice that JavaScript isn't in both sides. It used to be that JavaScript was only in the browser. But as people learned JavaScript, they said, you know what? I know this language. Kind of like if you know English or Spanish, you kind of want to, or whatever language it is, you want to keep speaking that same language because you know it. You don't want to have to learn another language just to speak to someone. If you can avoid it, if you can use your same language that you're already speaking, that's going to be easier. So once people learned how to write JavaScript, they said, you know what, I'd really like to do this stuff on the server. And so PHP has been around for a really long time. And yes, I could learn PHP, but I'd have to learn PHP. So if you already know JavaScript, you're like, hey, could I do this on the server? And so eventually they allowed us to do the same types of things we do in PHP, but using JavaScript, and it can run on the server. So there is client-side front-end JavaScript, and then there's server-side JavaScript as well. So it could be for both sides, which means that if you get into JavaScript, that you could do both front-end and potentially back-end as you start getting into JavaScript. So JavaScript is a big language. It can do a lot of stuff, but it just shows the power of once somebody knows the language, they want to keep using it. So JavaScript only got more powerful over the years, not less powerful. All right. So the first thing you're going to start with is a plan. If you're going to build a building, you don't just start throwing up 2x4s and hope the thing doesn't fall over. You plan it out. Same thing typically for a website. You're going to plan it out. And so for that, you're going to create a design using some sort of design program. The most popular programs are Sketch, Adobe XD, and Adobe Photoshop. I do hear a lot of people talking about Figma, but I don't see typically many design studios using it, at least not yet. I have seen a couple using it, but not nearly as many as Sketch, which is the forerunner right now. And then Adobe XD is kind of Adobe's version of Sketch. Now, Sketch is a Mac-only app. Now, most designers do typically use Macs. So if you go into web design studios, a lot of designers are going to be using Mac and using Sketch. Adobe's version is cross-platform, so it works on Mac and PC. So tonight I will be showing Sketch just because it is the front runner of what most people are using. But Adobe XD works very similarly. So if you're on Windows, the same types of things basically that I'm going to be using Sketch for, you can do in Adobe XD as well. And Adobe Photoshop, even though it is a photo editor, tons of designers know Photoshop, and so they do create their web designs in Photoshop as well. It's not as easy to do as it is in something like Sketch or Adobe XD, which are dedicated to doing web design and app design and all sorts of digital design, but you can use any of these three. And Figma, we'll keep an eye on it and see if it gets more popularity. I do hear a lot of people singing the praises of Figma, but just don't see as many studios using it yet. So we'll keep an eye on that one. It's kind of more of an up-and-comer as I see it. So let me show you just a little bit about graphics. I'm not going to go through and teach you a whole graphics program just because there are different ones out there. There is Sketch, there is Adobe XD, there's Photoshop. So I don't want to get into too many specifics, but just the general idea of how to use these. So even if you're on Windows and you're not using a Mac, that's okay. Just go for the general concept of these. So if you're creating a new document in your design app, you generally are going to create a new file. And then on there, you can design for various different size screens. So in the case of Sketch, I can insert an artboard, which is basically an area where I can design. And on the right-hand side, I can choose between some different preset sizes. So if I'm designing for an Apple device or an Android device, they've got a bunch of presets for all these various different screen sizes. They do have a responsive web here, and we have a desktop HD, which is 1440. I could choose that. And then I have an artboard here that I can design on, and I can put text and photos and design anything that I want. I can make this page taller, of course, because I'm probably going to need to add more content. But this is the place that I would start to design on. Now, I've already started a design, so I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to my desktop and just open that up. So I have this in my page designs. I have a sketch file already created. Because the goal is not to teach you a specific design program here, because it might be different ones, but just to teach you more the kind of conceptual level of what you do in the design program. So you bring in your logos and your photos, and you bring in your text or type out your text, you style it and you make it look good, and you come up with the plan of what you want to do for your website. Now for tonight, we're going to make a very simple website. So I wanted to keep it really easy to make. So didn't choose any fancy layout or anything here, just kept it really basic and really simple. So just one photo, one logo here, and some other text, which isn't too fancily formatted. So this is what we're going to be, I'm going to show you how to create this tonight. So you need to learn your design app and learn how to create a layout. And you can create as complex or as easy of a design as you want when you're doing it. I just wanted to keep it simple for tonight. So once you have your plan, you've chosen your layout, you brought in all your graphics, you've set your text, you've designed everything the way that you like it. all this is just a plan. It's not the actual website. It's something that looks like a website, but it is just a design for a website. The next step would be to actually convert this into an actual website. So we need to turn it into code to do that. Now, code can style things like text. It can set font, it can set size, it can set color, all that sort of stuff, and space, and it can create the layout of how big things are. But what code can't create is the graphic itself. So this photo that I have here, I brought it in, I've done some cropping to it, and I want to export this image at this size with this cropping from my design app. So all of our design apps can export in varieties of ways. And in Sketch, I select this photo, and on the right, there's a Make Exportable. So if I click the Make Exportable button there, then I can choose between some of the varieties of formats. For example, these top ones here, these are the web formats, except for TIFF. TIFF is not a web format. Actually, they didn't really organize this here. It's kind of a random spattering of stuff. I guess these are vector down here, and these are pixel based up here. Yeah, I guess that's the organization. So this is a photograph. Photographs are best saved as a JPEG. So I'm going to choose JPEG. That's the most appropriate format for this. We also have a logo here that was brought in from Adobe Illustrator, or if you can download things online, there's different icon libraries that you can download that are typically vector graphics. If you're downloading things online, you might find an SVG file or an EPS file, but typically, especially for web graphics, you'll find an SVG file. And in fact, that's what I want to create this as. I want to turn it into an SVG file. So I'm going to click Make Exportable there, and I'm going to choose the format SVG. So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. And that means that that graphic can be made at any size that I want in the web page without losing quality. So it's always going to be crisp and sharp and clean, no matter how big I enlarge it to. So I can shrink it and expand it and make it really any size that I want. All right. So what you do is you go through and you mark the different things that you want to export, and then you can export them. So the text I'm going to leave as text, and I'm just going to export the graphics, because the text I'm going to recreate the styling of that through code, which we'll see in a moment. All right, so now that I've marked each one of those, I could select one at a time and click Export Selected if I want to. But what I can do is at the top right, I can click the Export button, and that's going to export all of the things that I've got in my document. So I marked this as home and this as an SVG. Now, looking at the name of this here. All right, so let me cancel this for a second, because I see that name needs to be changed. The name over here in the layers list, that is the name of your file. So when we're naming things for the web, we don't want to use things like capital letters. We don't want to use spaces. So technically you can use upper and lowercase. It's just best to avoid it so you don't have to worry about making sure that your case is correct when you're doing your code. If everything is lowercase, that's just one less issue to worry about. But you definitely cannot use spaces. So if you're going to use a space, replace it with a dash or an underscore instead. But I'm just actually going to make this a lot simpler. I'm just going to simply call it logo, because that's much easier. So this will be called home, this will be called logo, and those layer names are going to be used for our file names that we're going to export. So I'm going to click the export button at the top right here again, and I can see that I'm going to export home as a JPEG and logo as an SVG, and we're good to go. So I'm going to click export, and then I'm going to put this onto my desktop here for a second. And under options here, we can see the quality setting for the JPEG. The SVG, there's no settings for. It just exports it, but the JPEG does have a quality setting. So if you don't see that, you want to make sure you show that, and then you can choose the quality. Somewhere around 70 is a pretty good default. I'm not sure what Sketch normally defaults to, but somewhere around 70% is good for the quality. You could go up or down from here if you want to. You could export your photo, see how it looks, and if it looks too low a quality, you could bump it up in quality. If it looks good, you can actually try going less in quality just to see if you can get away with a lower quality. The goal is you want to try to get your quality as low as you can get away with and still have your image look good. The idea is that with lower quality, you have a smaller file size. We want the smallest file size we can get away with because that's going to make our website load faster. Small file sizes equal fast loading web page. If your file sizes are too big, it takes a long time to load that page. So by reducing the quality, we're getting a smaller file size, and that's going to help us create a faster loading page. The progressive JPEG makes it load a little bit nicer, and Save for Web is always good because we are putting this on the web, so you definitely want to check that on just to eliminate things that you don't need when creating web graphics. So I click Export, and there we have our two different graphics. So if I go to my desktop to see those, I've got my JPEG there. On the Mac, I can hit the spacebar to do a quick preview just so you can see it. So this part is the thing that I needed from my design. Also my SVG file as well. Now this preview isn't the best preview because actually the SVG file is transparent, so it shows whatever through to whatever background you're going to be on. And also all this white space is not actually in the SVG. This is just the Mac doing kind of a not so great job at previewing the SVG file. But I just wanted you to see that I did extract this piece and this piece as well. So from the overall design, you extract your individual graphics, and then you can basically put them all back together again with code. So I have my graphics, I have my plan of what I want to do in my website. The next step is to actually build the functioning web page. And so for that, I do need to write some code. So I am done with it. Well, actually, I'm not quite done with this because I'm going to need to come back and check out like what the colors are, what the sizes are. So I'm going to leave this here in Sketch. I'm going to leave this open, and I'll come back to it in just a little bit. But we're going to need to write some code. So that's kind of the next step, is coming back here to my presentation, going over to coding. So using code, code is just text. So technically speaking, anything that can write plain text files could write code. But it's going to be much easier if you get a code editor. A code editor is like a text editor, but it understands code. So it's going to help you a lot. There's going to be features that it can do to make your coding life easier, and it'll save you time. And you definitely want to use a code editor, not just a plain text editor. A popular one, all of these are popular. So no matter which one you go with, all of these are good. My personal favorite at the moment is Sublime Text. I've been using it for years. I really like it. There's some things that I like about some of the other apps as well. Just like anything, I've never found perfect apps. There's things that I like about Sublime Text. There's things I like about the other ones. But Visual Studio Code and Atom are both free. So they are good. I'm not going to knock them. They are both good code editors. I do personally prefer Sublime Text, but you really can't go wrong with any of these. Sublime Text does have an unlimited free trial, so you can try it out for as long as you want, but it is $80 if you want to purchase it. So every once in a while it'll say, do you want to buy? So whenever you save, maybe like every 15 times you save, it says, do you want to buy? And you can keep clicking cancel as long as you want to try it out. Fully featured. Works just like if you pay for it. Just once you pay for it, the nag goes away, so that you have supported the developers and helped them to continue the development of Sublime Text. So any of these will work just fine, but I personally like Sublime Text. There's just certain things that I like about it that I keep coming back to. But even though these are free, they're certainly good code editors, and I know a lot of people that do prefer those. So a lot of code editors is personal preference. So you can use any of these if you want. I'm going to use Sublime Text because that is my personal preference. That's the one that I prefer. So let me show you how to do a little bit of coding. So I'm going to close this up here. That was just left open from before here. So normally when you launch Sublime Text, you are just going to have a blank screen. When you launch any code editor, pretty much, you're going to have a blank file. So if you said new file, it's literally just a blank document because you're going to be writing the code. We're going to be writing HTML, and then we're going to add some CSS code as well. And so this is how we actually make the working web page. And we'll open up in a browser and actually see how the web page actually works. Now, before I get started here, I do need to be a little organized about all my stuff. I need to collect all my images, and I need to save my document into a folder. So I'm not going to just go straight to coding right away. I'm going to make sure we get organized. in my files here, these are the files that you can download through the PDF that's at the beginning of these slides. So when you download that PDF, in there are instructions to downloading these class files. So this is what I'm going to demonstrate with. This is the finished website, so in case you want to take a look at the code that we wrote as the final product, you can take a look through this. But as a starter website, we are providing the images because we don't assume that you have Sketch or Adobe XD or something like that. So we're providing you with the home JPEG like I exported from Sketch, so we're giving you that image. We're also giving you the logo, which is the SVG logo that I exported from Sketch, and also another photo for a second page because we're going to create a 2-page website. And so I have the contact page as well, me there teaching a seminar. So we're providing those graphics. And if you're a web developer, it's very likely that you will get the graphics from a designer and they say, okay, here's the graphics, here's the design, you code it and make it look the way my design says to look. Kind of like an engineer gets a plan from a set of plans and says, okay, let's go ahead and build this going off of the plans. We've also given you an index.html. Now, an index.html, let's think about that. So this is basically a plain text file. So if I change this to txt, so index.txt, or I'll just even call it text, right? This is just a plain text file. There's nothing special about this plain text file. It's just text. So all I did is I just saved a plain text file, just a .txt file, and I called it index.html because we're going to be writing HTML. And functionally speaking, an HTML document is just plain text. This way you don't have to copy and paste from your design app. Let me open that up in Sublime Text. So I'm going to go to Sublime Text and I'm going to open that. So I go to open and I go to my desktop and getting started, the website. So notice in this website, we've organized all the stuff we need. We have our images. We also have our page. Now, if you're creating this yourself, you would just create a new document and just save it as index.html. So you would just say like new file and save as, and then you would just name it index.html. So it knows that it's an HTML file. So that's all you would do. And then you can copy and paste from an email, from your design app, whatever, wherever your text is. Normally, if you're going from a design, you'll be copying and pasting from your design. So I could have copied and pasted this from Sketch, for example. So this is all the text that I have in Sketch, but I could have just copied and pasted it from Sketch. And notice there's no code actually in here just yet. We're going to be adding code that gives the browsers more instructions. But technically speaking, this is an HTML document, so I could view it in a web browser right now. Even without adding any code, browsers will still do something with this. So if I go to any browser, Safari, Google Chrome, Firefox, if I'm on Windows, it could be Microsoft Edge, previously Internet Explorer. But any of these programs, these are what we call a web browser. And a browser understands HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. That's what they do. They render that code. We don't see the code, but we see the results of what the code tells the browser to do. So let's say I go to Chrome, and I'll use that. So here in Chrome, I'm going to open up a new tab because I want to be able to go back to my presentation there. And I can go to File Open if I'm on a Mac. On Windows, you can also do like Ctrl O for open, and you can open it that way. And you can literally open a document like you would open up a Word document in Word. You can go to File Open, and you can open up an HTML document. And you see the result of it. You see all the text. Another way you can also open up a web page in a browser is you can drag and drop from your desktop. So here I am on my desktop. I can drag and drop into the browser window. That also works. And another way you could do it is also to right click or control click on the Mac if you don't have a right click mouse. And you can say open with, and you will have all your browsers listed there. So I could choose Firefox, for example, if I want to open up in Firefox. And that will launch Firefox and it will open up there too. So notice what we see here is all the text just strewn about the page, just no line breaks or anything, just all that text. In my code, I have a bunch of line breaks here, like this is on its own line, this is on its own line, but there was no codes to tell the browser to do anything. So it never said go to the next line. We need to give it codes to do all that sort of stuff. So there are certain standard things you're going to want to add to every page. Just so you know, we do have it in the presentation. So if you're looking at the presentation, the next slide is going to have all the standard code. I'm going to quickly walk us through the standard code, but literally you could just copy and paste this into Sublime Text or whatever code editor you're using, and you would just put all your content here in the body. So I'm going to go through and just go through a couple of these things real quick here, and just to conceptually explain what these things are. So we have tags. Tags are in these less than, greater than brackets, and they're going to label something or tag it to indicate what it is. So we have their HTML tag. This says what's inside of this tag is all HTML, and that's everything in the page. So you're going to wrap this tag around everything in the page. So I'm going to start it at the top, and then down at the bottom, I'm going to end it. And the idea is by wrapping it around the whole page, everything inside that tag is marked up to say, this is HTML. Now, end tags look a little different than your start tags. They have a slash. So the slash says it's the end of something. So if there's no slash in it, it means it's the start of something, and this ends it. Everything inside of that tag is marked up to now be HTML. So now we've said it's all HTML. Okay. Within an HTML document, what two main sections do we have? It's kind of like a person. We have a head and we have a body. So in our document, we have a head tag. Now, as I start to type, it will actually give you hints as I start to type. This is what code editors do. They actually give you hints. I'm going to ignore all of those hints for right now because I want us to focus on the code and not learning a particular program and using those hints. I'm going to go one piece at a time. So we have a head and we have a body. Which do you think goes on top, the head or the body? The head, just like normal people. Our heads are on top. So the head goes first. I'm going to start the head, and then the end of the head is the same as the start, except it has a slash. So down below the head, after the head, I'm going to start the body. As I start to type, I know it does give me code hints. For right now, I'm just going to ignore them so we can focus on what I'm typing here. So we've got the head up there by itself, and then we have the body. Now the body is supposed to wrap around all the content on the page. So any content you want to see on the page, you put it inside the body. So all this stuff should be in the body. So I'm going to start the body here, and then down here at the end, after all the content, I'm going to end the body. Now I know about that slash. So check this out. When I open up the tag using this less than sign, watch what happens when I hit slash. I just hit one key. I hit the slash key. And the code editor said, oh, you want to end something? Okay, I'll end that for you. So it ended the last tag that I opened that I had not already closed. So the body is wrapping around the body of my content. We'll come back to the head and see what that's for later. But I've just created a web page with the basic tags. Now we can fill out more things in here, but we've got the basic stuff going. In the head, you might be thinking, what's in the head? What would you put there? Well, let's go to the web page itself and come back here. If I hit refresh, nothing changed. It still looks the same. But I just want to point out here up in the tab, notice how this tab has a nice label, but this tab does not. It just has the file name. Nobody wants to see index.html. That's not very attractive. We want to have a better title for the document. And this is kind of at the top of the page, like as though it's in the head of the page. So inside the head, we can have a title. So I can start the title, and then I can end the title. And the start and the end are always the same except for the slash. Inside the title, we can actually write in the title for the page. So this page happens to be about me as a web designer and instructor. So I can say Dan Rodney, instructor and web designer. All right, so that's going to be the title, what this page is about. And then I can save that change, come back to my browser, And to see the latest changes, I have to hit the refresh or reload button. And that goes and gets the latest version. So now I can see that I've got a proper title up there. That's very nice. Every page should have a unique title appropriate for that page. Not only is it visible up there, it's also going to be used when you bookmark the page. That's the title that you're going to see when you bookmark something. And very importantly, that's what you see in Google. For example, on my personal website, danrodney.com, I have this page of Mac keyboard shortcuts. And up here, the title says Mac keyboard shortcuts and keystrokes. I didn't know if people would type in shortcuts or keystrokes, so I threw in both of those words. So that's the title, Mac keyboard shortcuts and keystrokes. Let's say you Google Mac keyboard, and they suggest shortcuts, so that's what most people are probably going to choose. And pretty quickly here, you will see my website, but the most important thing here is look at what it says. It says the title. So this big text that you see here, that's the title of the page. So titles are important not only to identify the tab and for bookmarking, but most importantly for Google. It should contain the things that people are most likely to search for, and that when they see it, they'll be like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I want keyboard shortcuts or whatever they're searching for. So that's why the title is important. For each individual page having a different topic, each page needs to have a different title. So now that we've done that, we have the basics of the page. There are a couple other things that you'll want to add, and I'm going to actually just copy and paste these all just for the sake of time. I'm just going to copy those and paste them in. And just clarify a couple things here. So looking at this right here, so this was the HTML tag that we had. The lang attribute, lang is short for language. So you don't technically need a language specified, but if you put a language, and EN is for English. If you're doing Spanish, it would be Español, so ES. So they have different codes for if you're doing French or Spanish or whatever language you're doing. But this tells screen readers that this is an English page. So if it was hyphenating something, it could do proper hyphenation. If it was speaking the page, it would know how to pronounce things properly. Basically, screen readers and browsers understand the language. So that's something good for it to know about. There's also some other things that are necessary for the page to display properly. This little line right here is called a document type, and it used to be that we didn't have document types. But then they wanted to keep the web moving forward and adding new features. And so eventually they said, well, we want a new version of HTML. So version 2, version 3, version 4, now up to version 5. But moving forward, starting with version 5, it used to be prior to version 5 that they'd have this long document type that I would never remember how to type it out. I would always just have to copy and paste it because it was just too long. I'd make some typo. It was a whole long thing. And they had like version 4, there was transitional, there was strict, there was a bunch of different things in there, and it was too long. And HTML5 said, you know what? It's annoying to have to come back and change this version of HTML that we're using every time it changes. Let's get rid of this idea of version numbers, and let's just say it's now the living standard of HTML. It's going to evolve, it's going to change, but let's not number it anymore. Let's just go with a simple document type that just says, render this page according to the latest standards, whatever those are. So there's not going to be an HTML6 or 7, there's just the HTML forever. It's called the living standard. And so it will just always be the most up-to-date version of HTML. If you don't have that document type, browsers assume that this is a really old web page built before the days of document types. And so it will render your page like an old web page because browsers can actually adapt how they render a web page. And so we want to make sure that we have this latest document type to make sure that we are rendered according to the latest standards that are available for us to use. So we get all the latest features working the way that the browser should work in a modern, up-to-date way. So just make sure that our page is going to work according to the latest standards. This little code right here, this meta tag here, there's different meta tags that you can put in there, and those are used for different purposes. Meta is like extra information about the page. So what else does the browser need to know? This little part right here makes sure that special characters don't get screwed up. It's the character set. UTF-8 is actually for something called Unicode. It's one code for all platforms. So things like special characters like copyright symbols and trademark symbols, those will be displayed properly by putting this little bit of code right there. And this right here, this one here, there's this thing called a viewport. And this is used for mobile phones and tablets and desktops so that they are all viewed properly. It basically says that the width of the page should be whatever the device width is. So if we're on a small device, the page width should be the small device. If we're on a tablet, it should be the size of the tablet. And if we're on a desktop, it should be the size of the tablet. Basically say, I'm designing for each size in mind. So I am going to be designing for a mobile phone. I'm going to be designing for a tablet. I'm going to be designing for a desktop. And I want to make it look good on all of those screens. Prior to having this, we just designed sites for desktops. So back in the day before mobile phones, we would just create a desktop design. And it would be one size for everybody. And we just have to try to guess the average size that everybody had. So this little code says, now in the days of responsive web design, a responsive website responds to the different size screens, phones, tablets, desktops. And so we want it to honor the width, excuse me, the width of each individual device. And instead of it kind of thinking, hey, this was designed for desktops, let's just scale it down individually. This also says for initial scale, excuse me, to be 100% zoom, which means don't zoom in, don't zoom out, just be the normal size when we start out the page. So in short, this little line of code here just says, I'm designing a site and I'm going to do things that I need to do to make sure it looks good on mobile phones, tablets, and desktops. It doesn't automatically make your site look good on those. It just says that I'm going to do what I need to make sure that it works, make sure that it renders it properly. All right. So when I do hit refresh on this page, before I hit refresh, just watch the little space up at the top of the page. When I hit refresh, oh, actually it didn't change yet because we don't have any headings or anything like that. So, so you won't really notice much change there because we haven't done anything special, but you just want to have all those codes in there to make sure your page is going to render properly. All right, so now we can get started doing something that will actually look nice here in the browser. Now that we've got the standard basic kind of boring code there. We've got a heading here. We've got some subheadings here. And if I look at my design, excuse me, dry throat. All right, there we go. If I look at my design, I've got a main heading, and then I've got two sections. I've got two subheadings here, and I've got two paragraphs. So I want to make these look different. And we have headings in code. So I can pop back over here, and this is a heading. So these are paragraphs. So let's start with paragraphs. P is for paragraph. You're going to wrap a paragraph tag around, and remember the end tag has a slash to end. So by marking this up, you've said that is a paragraph. Let's see what we just did there. Save, come back to the browser, hit refresh. So you always have to hit refresh after making a change. Nothing tells the browser that it's going to automatically update. So it just sits there displaying the page as it was when you last opened it. So unless you hit refresh, it's not going to go get the latest version of the page. So that's why you have to save so that when you hit refresh, it can get those changes that you've saved. Notice that we have a paragraph now. It's separated by space from the other paragraphs, kind of like a business style formatted paragraph there. Now we can throw in some additional paragraphs. So again, P is for paragraph, and we wrap the paragraph tag around that paragraph, and we save, and then we go back over to our browser and hit refresh. So now our paragraphs are starting to take shape, but we do have our and actually this is a paragraph up here too for the navigation. All right, so here we have main headings and subheadings. So the page is about Dan Rodney. So, hi, I'm Dan Rodney. That's the major heading. Then when you break down this main topic, so let's say actually instead of saying hi Dan Rodney, I'll say I'm Dan Rodney, teacher and web designer. So that's what the page is about. That's the main heading. So that is an H1. H is for heading, just like P is for paragraph. And to be honest, if we only had one kind of heading, it would just simply be H. But we number them H1 through H6 because H1 is the first level, most important topic for the page. You might break that down into subtopics. I say may because you might not. You might just have a heading and that's it, have a simple structure. But that will make that a big, bold heading. Right, there you go. So big, bold heading there. You can further break that main topic down into subtopics. So I'm Dan Rodney, a teacher and web designer. I'm also a trainer. I'm also a web developer, right? So it kind of goes into them. So really, I'm going to leave this back and I'm going to say, hi, I'm Dan Rodney. There we go. Hi, I'm Dan Rodney. I'm a trainer. I'm also a web developer, designer, and more. So that's the main topic about me. We're going to break that down into heading 2s. So heading 2, that's a second level heading. That is a subtopic to the main topic. This is what the page is about, but this is one section of the page. And this is another section of the page. So you're giving topics for the page. Think of it like an outline. This is the main topic, and then you further break it down. So these would be like nested bulleted lists inside of this, if you're thinking on a topical kind of outline. Now, the side effect of making them headings is it does make them bold. It makes them on their own line. Heading 1s are the biggest text. Heading 2s are a little bit smaller. Heading 3s would be even a little bit smaller. So there is a visual impact, but we're not doing it for the visuals. We're doing it because we want browsers and screen readers to understand this is what this topic is. And when I say screen reader, I'm talking about people that are vision impaired, that might be blind or can't see well enough that they want to have the web read to them instead of only relying on sight. So screen readers can actually read web pages to people. We don't only interact with the web just by looking at websites. So knowing that things are headings, knowing that things are paragraphs are going to help Google. They're going to help screen readers to kind of understand the content on the page. We can also use them as hooks for styling too, because I do want to make the heading 1 look different than the heading 2s, because in my design, I call for a blue main heading and then different subheadings in there. So we'll do that in a sec, but I've got the basic kind of formatting down here. I do need to bring in my other content though. I've got some images that I don't have in here. Otherwise, the content is kind of done. We will need to do the styling though. So for my images, I have an image tag. Now with the image tag does not have an ending tag. If I try to end it, you'll notice that it doesn't work because they're like, hey, you can't end an image tag. You just can't do it. Because what would you put inside of here? The idea of marking up something is to say, what's in this tag is something. Like this is a heading. You should be able to select something and the tag that wraps around it should describe what that thing is. And that tag says that is a heading. This tag right here says that stuff, that's a paragraph. So can I put an image in there right there? No, I can't because I'm in the text file. I can't put an actual image in there. So there's no end tag for image tags. HTML is a little bit like English in that there's some funky things sometimes, little exceptions to the rules. Most tags end, but not all. In the case of an image though, I still have to tell it what image to put there, but that is done on the opening tag. So we have these things called attributes, kind of like we saw up here. The tag can sometimes have an attribute, which equals some value in quotes. Just like the meta tag has a character set attribute, and its value is UTF-8, which is Unicode. Here I can have a attribute called source, SRC for short. They like to abbreviate things so that we can save typing. And it's always going to be the name of the tag, and then you can have your attribute name, and there's a space in between. And then the value for that attribute is going to be set, so it says equals, and then quotes, and what's in the quotes, that's going to be your attribute. attributes value. So this is the image is the tag, source is the attribute, and then equals a value. So where is this image, in fact? Let's see. Remember our structure here. This is one of the reasons why you want to keep yourself organized. Right now, we're in index.html. In that folder for our website. So you're going to have a folder for the website, right? For every website you're going to do, you're going to have one folder. You can't just start throwing things all around your hard drive. That does not work. On your web server, you're going to get one folder. On your computer, you have to have one folder, and you're going to put everything inside. You'll put all your HTML files, you'll put all your images. Generally speaking, people put an image into the images folder. So you don't have to, but it's generally what people do. The relationship between this document, which is what I'm in, and the images folder is that they're in the same folder. So I can just say, hey, go into the images folder, that goes into that folder. And then once you're in there, find logo.svg. So logo.svg. Now, what about somebody that can't see well and they're having the web read to them? What would we want them to hear if they couldn't see this? We can add some alternate text. And this literally says Dan Rodney. So I can say Dan Rodney or Dan Rodney logo so that they know that that's a logo. And that's what they would hear. They would hear the alternate text. In the web page, we won't see that text because it's meant to be read to someone, not for you to see it. And when I hit refresh, now we can see that that image comes through. Cool. Nice thing about this image, though, is it's vector. So if you do ever zoom in on the page, it looks really nice and it's crisp and sharp and beautiful. All right. Next up is the photo. So we're going to bring in that photo. I've got my navigation, and down below the navigation, we can insert the photo. So again, we've got an image tag. Again, we will not end it because all images, they merely have a source. And what are we going to set that equal to? Well, I have to go into my images folder, and in my images folder, I have a home.jpg. If you want, you can copy and paste just to make sure you don't make any typos. And I know that there were code hints coming up there, but I'm specifically ignoring them because I want you to focus on the code that I'm writing and not using a particular program and little add-ons. Like I have some add-ons that add that feature so that I don't technically have to type that all out, but I want to focus on the code rather than using the program to do things for me. I will write an alternate bit of text here for this. So this is a computer with camera and notebook. That describes that photo. And I can save that. So I'm just hitting Command S on the Mac or Control S on Windows for file save. So every time you have to make sure you hit save because otherwise when you hit refresh, it won't be able to get those latest changes you made. So you definitely have to hit save. All right, so we got all our content. Now it just doesn't look that great. We need to get this text to be less wide here because in my design, I call for that to be a narrower column of text. And also I call for this to be in the middle of the page, not stuck to the left over there. So let's start to do some styling. First up, you put your content in. Then you can make it look nice. So for that, we're going to use CSS or cascading style sheets. Now, technically that is a companion language. It works with HTML, but it is not directly HTML. We can put it into our HTML document, or we can make a separate file and link to it. If you're sharing it across a website, it's a good idea to make a shared CSS file so that you can share it with your whole website. But to keep things simple for tonight, we're just going to put it into the current page. This is something the page will think about. It's going to think about how to style the page, but it's not actual content for the page. So we don't put it into the body because that's where content goes. Things the page thinks about are in the head. Like that's the brain. You think in your head. What's in your head is not meant to be on display. Your body is kind of the thing that people look at, right? So in the head, that's where we're going to put in a style tag. And that style tag, that is where we're going to put all of our CSS styles. In here now, I'm no longer writing HTML. I'm writing CSS. I'm going to refer to HTML elements that I've created, such as paragraph tags and image tags and heading tags and that sort of stuff, but I'm not directly creating those elements. I'm just referring to them for styling purposes. So for example, P is for paragraph. I want to style the paragraphs. I'm going to put a curly brace here to contain all the settings that I'm going to apply to paragraphs. So this makes a style for paragraphs. How do I want to make them look? Well, let me go over to Sketch. And for these paragraphs, if I select some text here, I can see that this is Arial regular. And the default font of the web page is not Arial. So I do want to set Arial, although I actually want to set Arial for everything, not just paragraphs. So I'll come back and I'll do that for everything in the page. But I do want to change the size and the color. So the size is 15 pixels over here on the right. And the color, if I click on the color box, I can see the hex code. The hex code is the code equivalent of that color. So I'm going to copy that color. But notice that if you mix up any color, that's going to give you a different hex code for that particular color. So every color has a hex, and you're going to grab that from your design app. If you say, oh, but I don't have a design app, how do I do that? Well, just Google color picker. And in Google, there's a color picker built in, and you can always get a hex code there. So that's another way if you don't have a design app that you can get those colors. Don't worry, you don't have to know how to read a hex code. Even though there is some reasons as to why they write it that way, you don't have to know how to do that. So when you are writing CSS, the way that you write CSS is different than HTML. You say, I want to style a paragraph, and these are all the things I want to do to that paragraph. Color is a property, and we can set a value of our choosing for that property. So kind of like we had attributes and values, and it was the attribute equals something in quotes. This is kind of equivalent. It's just not the same exact written syntax. It's the CSS property, a colon, and whether there's a space there doesn't matter because the colon is the separator. And then we put the value, and then to finish, we do the semicolon. The semicolon says end that, so you can move on to the next. So these are kind of like the quotes in a way, so that they kind of wrap around the value. After you have a semicolon, you can do another property. But let's just see that this one worked. So I will save, come to my browser, and hit refresh. And so now only the paragraphs, not the headings, just the paragraphs, those turned gray. I also want to change the size. So in Arial, this looks nice in 15 pixels. And also the line height right here, the line height is 28. So 15 for size and 28 for height. So I'm going to remember that, 15 and 28. So I'm going to set the font size is 15 pixels. And the line height, this is like, if you're used to print design, this would be leading in print design. But we don't have strips of lead on our screen. We're not doing metal typography here. We're doing screen design. And so now when I hit refresh, this is the size and the line height. And it's going to look better once I'm in Arial because Arial is a little bit easier to read at smaller font sizes. But in Times, this is a little bit small. The reason I don't want to set the font family here on the paragraph is I want to do it for the whole page. So I can go through individually and set things on headings, heading 1s, heading 2s, paragraphs. I could do that one rule at a time. So now let's go in and let's say I do a heading 1 style. I don't have to put that up above the paragraph. I just think conceptually it's nicer to have headings listed first. Like I'd have a rule for heading 1 and then heading 2. I just think that that organizationally makes more sense. I could have technically put them down below paragraph and it would have worked fine. It's just I need to find the rules later on, so I need to know where they are. So for heading 1s, if I go back to Sketch and I select my heading here, that's 25 for the size and then 28 for the line height. And let's copy this color here. Copy that. So 25 for the size. Let's go do the size here. So font size. So it was 25 pixels. And then the color was that, which I copied from Sketch. And for the heading 2s, let's go to the heading 2s. that is 21, and the hex code is 000, which is black. So I can copy that. So 21 and black. So and actually black is the default, so I don't have to change that. So if you look in the page, normally text is black, so I don't have to do anything for that. So I will just say that that is a font size of 21. So we'll save that and then go back to my browser and hit refresh. So now I've got my slightly smaller heading 1. This is still a little bit bigger than this, but we wanted them a little bit closer to each other. But notice it's not in all caps. And in my design, I call it to be in all caps, just for this heading, not the subheading. That's one of the things that makes that main heading look a bit beefier. Now let's say you don't know how to do all caps in CSS, but you kind of know how to do some CSS. Well, you can go to Google and you can type in CSS, all caps. And we'll just click the first thing just to see if we can find it there. They talk about some things here and they give some examples. You can make it lowercase. No. You can make it uppercase. Uppercase. Make all the characters uppercase. That sounds good. Yes, so that sounds good. Let's find the thing here. Oh, did I pass it? Make it all uppercase. Where was that? There we go. Right here it is. Yeah, I just passed that. There we go. So they're giving an example. So in this case, they're saying paragraphs have text transform uppercase. But I don't want to do it to paragraphs. I want to do it to my heading. But this is the property and the value. So I can take that and copy it and go back. And I want to do that on heading 1s. So once you know how CSS kind of works in general, you can start to learn additional properties and their values. Because as long as you know how to apply it to something, you can find out what that property is, what the values can be. These are languages that are established, pre-made things. I'm not just making up font size. I'm not just making up color. These are things that the language gives us. So CSS is an established language. HTML, an established language. So HTML says you've got a heading 1, so that's H1. You've got a heading 2, so that's H2. These tags are built into the language, just like the words that I'm speaking are things in the English language. These are predefined languages, and the only way you can know what these are is to learn those tags. There is a body of a standards body that actually defines these standards, and it's the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group, which is WWIG for short, is at least what I say. I don't know officially how you pronounce that. It's kind of a odd thing to look at. But this website right here, they define the living standard. It used to be the W3C, but they kind of went off the rails with XHTML, and Apple and Google and everybody had to kind of splinter off and make this other working group, and then they ended up taking over and creating HTML5, so they kind of took over the standard, and they now publish the standard here. So this is the latest stuff about HTML. So if you want to actually read the standards from the people that make the standards themselves, and they're always refining it and updating it and making it better, this is the actual source of who creates the standards. And then it's up to browser makers to implement those standards. So consider this like the original dictionary of the people defining what these things are. All right, so let's close that up here. So did I save that? Let's go back to Sublime Text. So I put in the, nope, I didn't save it. So let's save that. I put in my uppercase. Let's go back to Chrome and hit refresh. Now that's uppercase. Cool. So I've got my basic text formatting down, but I'm in the wrong font for everything. What I don't want to have to do, I don't want to have to go piece by piece by piece doing this for every single thing. I could, but that's repetitive. Instead, everything in the body, I want to be the same font. So just like I said, paragraphs, whatever's in a paragraph should be this color. I can say whatever's in the body should be a certain font. So I can go up here and say, hey, everything in the body, just like everything in a heading 1 tag gets this. Everything in a body tag gets this. And I can set a font family. And a font family could be a list of fonts, because we don't know what fonts everybody else has on their computer. And we do need to use a font that people have on their computer or their device. There are ways you can load in custom fonts, but you'd actually have to put in some code that would download the font file for use within the web page. That goes beyond what we have time to do today, but just know that you can do custom fonts if you want. Because we're keeping it simple for tonight, we're just going to list fonts that commonly are on everybody's computer. So everybody should have Arial. But what if they don't? Maybe Helvetica is a nice backup that a lot of people should have. But what if they don't have either of those? As a category of fonts, there is a sans serif font. Serif is a little decorative kind of component, kind of like Times Roman. Has these little kind of decorative like plateaus at the top and the bottom, like the little like feet. Those are serifs. Sans serif means without. So sans is without those serifs. So that's a category of typeface like Arial and Helvetica. So it should be Arial, but just in case they don't have it, then it will be Helvetica. Just in case they don't have either of those, it'll at least be some generic type of sans serif that the device has. I don't know exactly what it'll be, but it should be Arial in this case because most people have Arial. And look at that. Everything in the page now has Arial. I didn't have to go piece by piece by piece setting that. There's also other things that I'd like to do on the body, such as not allow it to get too wide. This page is allowed to get the full width of my browser window, as big as the screen. So this text could get really, really wide and not look very good. So let me go back to my design. And when I select the photo, I can see that the photo's width over here under W is 720. So I want to limit the page to being 720 pixels in size. So I'm going to go back over to my code, and I'm going to set this width to be 720 pixels. Now, you don't actually want to use width, but I want to show you why you don't actually want to use width. In this case, because width is a hard-coded value. When I hit refresh, it does do the width that I want, but the problem is it's not flexible. So it does that width whether or not it fits in the screen. If it doesn't fit in the screen, it forces me to scroll over, and that's not what we want. We want to allow this to reflow and be good on small screens, not require a screen of 720 pixels. So I can say max width. The biggest it can be is 720, but it's okay to be smaller. That's more flexible. I can save that and hit refresh. So it still does have a maximum. The biggest it can be is 720. But notice how the text can now reflow for smaller size screens. That's so much better. This is how we start to build what we call fluid websites that change across different screen sizes. So it'll look nice on small phones as well as bigger desktops as well. Now, unfortunately, the image is not scaling down automatically. So we do have to go in and tell images to do that. So by default, images are the size you make them. I'm going to tell this image that the maximum it can be is 100% of whatever it's inside. So that is relative to the container that the image is sitting in. Since the image is sitting inside the body, when the body is 720 pixels, this will be 100% of that size. And that's the biggest. It can be smaller, but it won't be more than the size of the body because that's the parent container. So now when I hit refresh, it can go up to the 720. And since this image can't be bigger than its container, when that container gets smaller, the image says, oh, I can be 100%, but I can't be bigger than that. That's the biggest I can be. So it'll allow it to scale down. Now, it's good that the images didn't scale up to fill the container. We only want to say, don't be bigger than their container. So it allows it to scale down if need be. Cool. All right, so I've got my basic page going on here, although I don't like that it's aligned to the left. I do want this to be centered within the page. So how do I center that within the page? This one's a little bit odd because I've set the width and there's some space over here on the right. Space outside is called margin. There's space inside, which is called padding, but this is margin space. Right now, all the margin space is going to the outside on the right, but I want it to be on the left and the right. I don't know how much it's going to be, so I can't set a margin of a specific pixel amount. I just know I want the margins to be automatically figured out for me. So I'm going to set the margins to auto on this. And the left, right, top, and bottom will now be automatically dealt with. And now when I hit refresh, it kind of magically centers, because all that space outside the box is automatically being balanced. There can be less margins or more margins, but they are automatically being taken care of now. Now on smaller screens, this doesn't look so great because now there's no space around the page. So I want some space inside the body as well. So the other spacing that we have is called padding. And if you ever ship out something using like UPS or FedEx or something, you know that you should put the padding on the inside of the box. You know, like put your bubble wrap, the padding on the inside. Don't put the bubble wrap on the outside. The UPS guy looks at you really strange. Like, why didn't you put the padding on the inside of the box? Don't put it on the outside of the box. So padding goes on the inside. So let's say I put like 20 pixels, 10 pixels. Let's see, 10 pixels. That's a little bit small. Maybe go back and make it 20 pixels. Each time I make a change, I hit save to save that. And now we have a little bit nicer space. So that's space inside the box that we can see on our smaller screens. And then that is looking pretty good here. It's looking nice. All right, so that will accommodate smaller screens and bigger screens. Good. So I made a nice looking web page here. Now all I need to do is make a second page so that I have a website and link between them. So I've got one page already. Now I can just duplicate that page. So I could take this page that I've already got and I could just duplicate it. So I can select it, and actually, you know what? Let's open that back up in Sublime Text, because I could just save as. So open this back up in Sublime Text, and I'll just save as. Save as. Now, for naming. Why was it called index.html? Well, when you're naming web pages, you can name them any name that you want, so that you can have a contact us page. But like I said, when we were naming images, you're not allowed to use spaces in your file names. You can use a dash or an underscore, but you're not allowed to use a space in a web file name. And of course, if you can keep it shorter, great. But if you were going to say contact us, use a dash or an underscore. Technically, you can use upper and lowercase letters, but it's easier if you keep everything lowercase, because when you link, you do have to make sure that you're case sensitive. If you don't get the correct case, then the links might not work. So you can name things whatever you want. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to call it contact. But as you create all these different pages, you can have multiple pages. You're going to have contact. You're going to have all these other ones, services, about, whatever it is. So how does a website know which is your first page? That's a specially reserved name called index.html. Index.html is your home page. So that's a special name that you have to use for your home page. And then any other page you can name whatever you want. But the home page has to be called index.html. That's just a special reserved name that you have to use. So if you only have a one-page website, you're just going to have an index.html. And then for the other pages, you can name them whatever you want. So the contact page, I'm going to say that the title is Contact Dan Rodney. And down below here, this is going to say, the heading on the page is going to say Contact Dan Rodney. And I don't need a subheading for this. I'll just have a paragraph of text. Don't need the other headings down here. And this will say, please email me. I am lonely. All right, that's going to be my, and also my my home JPEG. Remember we gave you another image here called contact.jpg. So this is going to be contact JPEG, and the alternate text for this could be Dan teaching a seminar in front of a group. There we go. So save that. Now I can preview that by right-clicking and opening that up with my browser. So let's keep going with Chrome. So now I've got this page, and I've still got my home page, but I have no way to get between those two because I haven't made a link. So we can link it up, upload it, and we'll have a working website. So how do I get from one page to another? So from the index, I would like to click Contact to get to my contact page. So we're going to use the A for anchor tag. We're going to anchor ourselves to another page, kind of like chaining ourselves to another page, linking ourselves to another page. See how that metaphor kind of gets you over there? You need to tell it what page you're going to go to, but the text you put in the anchor tag, that's the thing you're going to click. And you can put anything in there that you want. You can put an image, you can put text, you can put anything inside of that link. But you're going to click that, and where are you going to go? You're always going to have an href. So we are writing hypertext markup language. That's HTML, hypertext markup language. We're going to reference another page of hypertext. So href is a hypertext reference, referencing another page, like go to another page of hypertext. And the other page is called contact.html. So I'm in index. I can say, go over and find contact.html. If it was in a folder, like my images, you always have to say the folder and then the file to go to. So it's about getting from your current file location into the other file location. So it's a relative path. How do you get from this file over to that other file? I don't have any folders, so I can just simply put the name of the file. And now I made a link. So now on this page, I can hit refresh and I can click contact to go to the contact page. To get back, I could make the logo link back to the home page. So in the contact page, I can wrap an anchor tag around the SVG file, and that will reference the indexed.html because that's my home page. So when I click the logo, it will go home. And so you can put anything you want in the link. It could be text, it could be images, and when you click that thing, it'll go to the href. So it'll go to that other page. So I hit refresh, and now I can go between these two pages, and I made a beautiful website that only I can see because it's sitting here on my computer. I want to share it with the world now. And so the last part of this puzzle is uploading it to a server. There are lots of web hosts that are out there. There's different companies. One is Namecheap, but there are tons of companies out there. If you look at a hosting plan like them, let's say you look at some of their shared hosting, they're cheap. Namecheap. They sell domain names, which are your .com names. They sell hosting. They sell a bunch of different things. But let's say you look at something like this. So you do save some money on your first year, which does mean that it'll go up. So you pay $17.28 for your first year, and it renews at $33.88. So $34 a year for your subsequent years. They give you plenty of space, solid state, fast drives. You can host up to 3 websites. So you can actually, for the $34 a year, you can host up to 3 websites. You can do one, but you can do multiple ones. And they give you one domain, but not like, they don't give you a .com. They give you .fun, .host, or whatever. So if you want a different domain, you can purchase that. I think they only charge like around $10 or something for their domain names. They don't charge very much. So just to be clear, there's 2 parts to make a website work. There's your hosting and there's your domain name. So they sell domain names if you want. So you can get your domain name and your hosting from one place. So let's say I am a developer. I'll say I am a web developer.com. Let's see if that's available. Search. That is available. Yeah. So $9 a year, you can get a domain name. So not expensive stuff here. That is why they're called Namecheap, because they are very affordable. And you can get your domain name. So for $9 a year for the domain name, that's your .com, .bike, .dev, whatever it is. Lots of different extensions that you can get. You're going to pay that. It's not per month, per year. $9 a year, so not very expensive. And then in the case of the hosting, that is, the 34. So basically like $50, less than $50, you can get a domain name and a web host. So the web host, they hold your files. The domain name is just a pointer to the web host. Now, in the case of Namecheap, they can be both your domain host, the name, right, and the web host. If you want to get different companies, if you want Namecheap to do your domain name, but you already have hosting on GoDaddy or whatever it is, you can always point your domain name to some other host. They don't have to be the same company. They can be different companies. Certainly probably easier if you get everything done from one company, especially when you're first getting started, because then they'll configure the domain name to point to your web hosting because it's all within one company. So for your first time, probably easier just to get everything from one place, just to make it as easy as possible. So once you sign up with a company like Namecheap or any other company, and we don't get any kickbacks or anything from Namecheap. They're just, I like them as an affordable solution. So, and they have very clear pricing here just to show you an example. But whether you use that company or another company, you're going to need a domain name, and it needs to be available that nobody else has taken it, and you get your hosting. So you set up your account with them, and they're going to give you an account that you can log into, and you can tell them the websites that you're doing, because here you can do up to 3 websites in this hosting plan. And you will get some information to upload your files. It's called FTP, File Transfer Protocol. And this is a way for you to upload your files to the web host, because they're basically going to give you a folder on their server. Their server is a computer, and it's got a folder, just like I have a folder on my computer. I need to move these files from my computer to their computer. So you're going to log into your account, you're going to find the FTP information, and you're going to need to get an Ftp app. So for uploading, there's a free one called CyberDuck. That's nice. Now, be careful on this website. Please be careful. This download button here, this is whatever this is. I wish that Google would never allow download buttons in ads. Please don't download whatever is in this ad. Down here, this is the download button. This is the download for Mac or PC, or you can go get it on the App Store if you want to. This one is the legitimate place to get it. So you click download. Again, be careful that stupid ad right there. These are the legitimate downloads for Mac and PC. You click those, you'll get CyberDuck. It's a free program. It's a great program, but just please don't download whatever junk. This is not going to be good for you. Anybody that puts an ad on Google, and because this thing called ad choices, that's Google ads. If they put a download button in it, you know it's a shady app. It's just not good. So please don't click that. Click these legitimate ones. Okay. You can download CyberDuck. It's a free app. It's a great little free FTP program. And once you log into your account, you find the info. You can then upload your files. If you're not sure how to upload, if you don't know where that info is, then contact your host and see if they can point you in your account as to where to find the FTP info. All right, so I'm going to go to CyberDuck here. And I'm going to open up a connection. Now, this is where you're going to put in the 3 main pieces of information: your server, username, and password. So this is where you're going to get this information from your account that you've set up with your web hosts. For today, I'm going to use a site called thejivefactory.com, which is what we use just for demonstration purposes for various things that we do at Noble Desktop. Now, I don't want to replace the full-on homepage of thejivefactory.com. This is like a fictional site that we use for doing certain things at Noble. So I don't want to replace the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend to be on the full site, but I made a little folder within the website. I made a Rockstar folder in here. So jivefactory.com/rockstar. So this is a little folder in the website. Just pretend that it's the full website. Everything's gonna work exactly the same as if you were just on the root level, the main website. So just even pretend that's just not there. That's just so that I don't replace the whole website. I just want to work in a folder so nobody else sees what I'm doing here. I uploaded this earlier today. Just said, hope you're enjoying the seminar. And I want to replace this page with the page that I just made. So I need to enter in the connection information for that website. So typically it's going to be ftp.thewebsite.com. So in this case, it's predictable as ftp.thejivefactory.com. And then your username you have to get from your web hosts, right? They're either going to give you one or you're going to create one yourself. So we are rockstar@thejivefactory.com. And I've already entered in the password on this computer, so it remembers it. But you would need to put in the password. Now, this is your FTP password. This is likely going to be different than your account password with, let's say, GoDaddy or Namecheap or whoever it is. So this is why you need to look in your account with your web host to find the FTP info for your website. So you need the server name for the uploading for the FTP server, the username, and the password. Once you hit connect, you connect into the live server. There's no undo on this side of things. So just know that you can't undo things. So if you mess up here, you messed up. But this index, that's the one that's literally live on the website right there. I want to upload it I want to upload the things that I changed on my computer. So here's CyberDuck. Here's my computer. This is what I did on my desktop. These are the files I just created. I'm going to just drag them over here to CyberDuck, and it's going to say, hey, you're uploading index, and that already exists on the server. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes, I want to overwrite it. So continue. That's going to replace the current index with this and upload my images and upload my contact. I'm done. I just went live with my website. I can hit refresh, and literally there's the website. I can click contact to go to that page. I can hit the logo, click on that. So I can go back and forth, and I made a little website. Now I have two copies of the website. I have the thing that's on the web server, and I have the copy on my computer. In the future, if I ever need to make changes, I make changes to the one that's on my computer and make sure that it's good. If I like those changes, I will then upload those to make them live. So the one that's on my computer, if I go in and make changes, so like on the contact page, I'll say, please send work. I had a child. All right, so I make that change. Do you think that that's been uploaded to the website? No. No, I can open this on my computer and make sure that it looks good. So I can make sure that I did a good job, but the live website isn't updated because I didn't upload it. So if I go to contact, that's still the old page there. So I need to, if I like it, upload it to the server. And that's a good thing because you want to make sure that you like it before you upload it. You don't want to be working directly off of the live website. So then you take the file from your computer, drag it over onto the server. It'll say, hey, that's already there. Do you want to replace it with the new version? Yes, I do. And now it's been updated. So now I can hit refresh and the change has been made. Now, let's say somebody asks you to work on their website and says, here's the FTP info. Here's the address, username, and password. Go ahead and make some changes. You will be able to log in to CyberDuck and you'll be able to see all those files, but you don't have them on your computer. So you can create a folder on your computer, let's say somewhere, you say client website. And in there, you could just drag down the files from CyberDuck onto your computer. And once they're on your computer, then you can make changes. You make your changes, make sure they're good. When you're done, copy the files back up, and you have made changes to somebody's website. But they have to give you the FTP info, the address, username, and password, and then you can make changes to those things. So in a very quick nutshell, that's the basics of creating a custom coded website, designing and coding. Now, of course, there's a lot more that can be learned if you want to develop websites. We do, of course, have classes that you can learn these things in if you want to learn coding. So you can check out our web design classes. We also have a variety of certificate programs. So if you want to do things like learn front end, or if you want to learn full stack, which is front and back end, you can check out the individual certificates. Some of the certificates include graphics. So like, for example, the web design certificate, that includes graphics as well as doing code, also gets into emails as well. So we have a variety of different sizes. So if you just want to learn just front end coding, but no graphics, no emails, you can check out the front end one. We have a nice little comparison that if you click on here, you can compare the different certificates so that you can figure out which one is right for you depending on which things you want to learn. Like, do you want to learn graphics? Do you want to learn HTML email? And you can kind of figure out what is right for you if you want to do these. All these classes are held live online, so if you want to do it, it's an interactive class. You can ask questions, and the format of these classes is that we'll do a demonstration, and then you do a hands-on exercise. It's a coding exercise, and that exercise is very much like the exercise that's at the beginning of this slide deck. So if I go back to the beginning slide here, this PDF exercise, this is the step-by-step coding instructions for all the site that I made here, you can, if you want to practice this out and like download Sublime Text and go through and code it step by step, this is going to walk you through adding all the codes that I did, kind of explaining things just like I did here, but step by step, so you can practice this stuff hands-on. And in the beginning of this, it has the instructions for getting the class files that I demonstrated with. So if you want to go back and actually practice the coding yourself, you can do this exercise and try it out and code up your site. We don't have the upload part just because we didn't know if you'd have a web host and what the settings would be in there, but it does walk you through the process of doing the code itself. So, so I'm going to open up to questions here that people are attending live. I'm going to answer their questions, but I might not be incorporating that into the recording. So I do want to say thank you for attending. If you need to head out live, I understand. And if you've been watching this recording, thank you so much for attending, and best wishes for getting started in web design, and hope to see you in a future class. Now, for those of you who are asking questions, because I saw some questions in here. So Yadi is asking, now when does Wix or WordPress work differently, or rather after the design is completed in Sketch, can it be exported and coded by these programs? Good question. So something like Wix is they try to be like a web design coding type of thing. So they're a whole different workflow. Like, you're not going to be able to custom code in Wix. They're a consumer-oriented design coding platform that produces not such great websites. It's consumer-facing. It's meant to be kind of easy for people to create websites with, that can kind of like, you can kind of design with it, but it's kind of like design on rails, if you will. I personally wouldn't recommend Wix for websites. Something like, if you want something that is the like kind of better looking websites where you don't have to know code and you don't have to kind of design, something like Squarespace is going to be kind of better than something like Wix. But with those kind of platforms, they're not like this kind of workflow that I showed where you can actually do whatever you want. You can only do what they allow you to do. Now, something like WordPress, which I mentioned, WordPress is a content management system that allows you to take your content, headings, paragraphs, images, and all that sort of stuff, and you can, if you know code, you can do anything you want with that, because you can create themes, and those themes control the look and feel of the site. So if you don't know code, you can download or purchase, some of them are free, but some are purchasable. You can get somebody else's theme. So if you get somebody else's theme, they have done the code. So they've done HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, wrapped it up into a theme, and you can either download it or you can install it directly into WordPress itself. Like, you can browse themes in WordPress. And so you can use pre-existing themes from somebody else, or you can make your own. And because it's just managing content, you can kind of do whatever you want with your content if you know code. Now, it's not a design program. It doesn't pretend to be that. Whoever creates those themes, they design those themes, they code those themes. So if you're going to put a website into WordPress after what we've done here, so I could take this site that I've done and I could then turn it into a WordPress theme, and then I could apply it to a WordPress site. Also, if you know code, you can take a pre-existing theme that you either purchased or you got for free, and you could tweak it, because you can go into the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code to work with it. Question in the chat, is WordPress harder than Squarespace? Yes and no. It depends. It depends on what you want to do. Something like Squarespace it's content management, meaning that you can go in and you can create headings and paragraphs and you can link things. But it's also kind of a little bit of design ability as well. So if you want to choose an existing theme that Squarespace offers and tweak it a little bit, Squarespace is going to be easier because you don't have to know any code for that. But there's limitations. So you're going to kind of hit a wall. If you do know code, Squarespace ends up kind of being frustrating, because Squarespace is, again, it's more consumer oriented. So it's kind of targeting people that don't know code but want to do some design. So Squarespace, I think of as like, here's some nice looking templates that you can kind of tweak to some extent, but we're going to keep you on like design rails, so you can't go too off the rails. So it's still like you kind of start from a nice place and you can't go too far off. But if you know code, it kind of gets frustrating, and it's probably not the best choice if you do know code. Whereas WordPress is, if you can find a great theme that's the way you like it to be, whether it's paid or free, you can start with that theme, but you can't really do much design tweaking with it. The theme might give you some customization, but not as much as what Squarespace is going to offer. But if you know code, you can do whatever you want with WordPress. And also, because WordPress is an open source thing, you can get hosting from anybody with WordPress. Whereas Squarespace, it's a Squarespace website. You have to go to Squarespace. You have to stay with Squarespace. So they dictate all your costs. And so you can save money by going with something like WordPress, because you can go to any host, not just Squarespace. So it's pros and cons for every thing that you do. There's also another question here that Carolyn's asking is, I have a pretty complex website in Adobe Muse. I need to recreate, redesign it in something else. So yeah, Adobe Muse was discontinued. It was like Adobe InDesign for web design, but it produced horrible code and it wasn't very good. And so it never really took off with web design professionals. So Adobe killed it. And if you want to recreate it, like I said before, so Squarespace is not the best design tool. It's you choose a theme and then you can tweak it a little bit. If you want to recreate it, so a lot of designers, they want to design and produce a website and they want their cake and they want to be able to eat it too. There's no good app that really designs and produces a website all in one. So the way that I showed it is I can design anything that I want, and then if I know code, I can make it work the way I want. So I can design and code a completely custom thing. Now, if you do the design and you can hire somebody to do the code, that can work, but you're not really going to find one great app that does the design and the code all in one thing. The closest that I've seen to something like that is something called Webflow, and Webflow is kind of trying to be design and code at the same time. But because you're thinking about how the website's functioning, I think it kind of it makes the design stage a bit harder and more cumbersome. So if you really want ease of design, just focus only on design. That's where Sketch and Adobe XD and Photoshop work well, because you can just design and you're not worrying about the limitations of building the site. And then the step is design first and then code. Of course, that takes more work. It takes more time. It's more expensive, but you get to do anything you want. So Dreamweaver is just Dreamweaver is a code editor. It's not a very good code editor in my opinion. I used to use it for a while and it was good back in the days of a much easier, simpler web. There was a time when it was actually decent for a little while, but those days have since long gone. And so Sublime Text, Atom, Visual Studio Code, they're all much better code editors. And Dreamweaver does have like a visual side of things, but it's not a design tool at all. People want Dreamweaver to be a design tool, but it's not a design tool. It is a code editor that has a visual side to it. But I think it's better and it's more marketable as a skill to learn proper coding and to not try to rely on that kind of visual side, because it's not that great of a visual side. People wanted Dreamweaver to be a design tool and to produce the website. It never tried to be that. People had an expectation that it was that, but it actually never said it was that. People reading into like, I want a design tool that produces the website. And they're like, Dreamweaver does that, right? No, it doesn't. So, all right. Well, it looks like that is all the questions answered there. So once again, thank you very much. Hope to see you in a future class, maybe. So if you want to learn more, definitely check out our classes, and hope to see you in one of those in the future. All right, so thanks so much, everybody, and hope you got some stuff out of this, and feel free to go through that exercise and practice it so you can start to learn some coding and get your feet wet in that. All right, Have a great night, and thank you everybody for attending.